With Ken. Welcome to our Community Preservation Committee meeting. Today's Thursday, September 12th of the great year 2024. This meeting will be conducted remotely over Zoom. Attendance by board commission members will be remote. Remote attendance shall count towards quorum. As always, the meeting may be broadcast live and recorded for ECAT purposes. So, now that we have got that out of the way, I do know that for a variety of reasons, just in case people are wondering why folks aren't on camera, but Meredith and Amanda are both unavailable to be on camera, but we are happy to have their voice. So just to give you guys a heads up on that. Stephanie, I'm assuming the same is true for you as well?
Yes.
Perfect. So no worries. I think we can do voice verification and confirm that we know you and who you are. So I'll just do a quick roll call to open it up. Going in order on my screen, Al Benson,
Present.
Jim Lee,
Here.
Amanda Varela,
Here.
Dennis Sheedy,
Here.
Meredith Keach,
Here.
Tom Broussard is here as well. We have enough for quorum, which is fantastic. Good to see everybody. We have officially started school. I'm not sure if I'm ready to say that summer is over, but it's good to see folks. We do have first just order of business for housekeeping. Minutes for the regular session dated August 8th, 2024. Happy to take any feedback if anybody has any thoughts or edits that they'd recommend on those minutes. Otherwise, I would take a motion to accept.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Lee, seconded by Mr. Sheedy. I'll go around in order in the reverse order this time. Meredith Keach.
Abstain.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So no pressure, but the 5 of us would have to vote in order to ensure we had enough votes for quorum, I believe. Is it 5 out of 9, or is it just the majority of the call? I think it's 5 out of 9, right?
I think that's right.
So we'll see how we do. Dennis Sheedy?
Aye.
Amanda Varela?
I need to abstain also, unfortunately.
Then we shall table this until our next meeting. No worries. Let's move into our next order of business. So Wayne, if we just put this on the next meeting of business, that would be great. The Unionville Pickleball Courts project update. I'm assuming that's why Mr. Pitty has joined us. Perhaps not.
Ms. Danielson is here, actually.
Yes, that's me.
All right.
So I have some good news. The repairs on most of the repairs on the coating have been completed. There is an area around the interior fence posts that needs a little bit more work than the other areas of cracking in the seal coating. And when I'm back in the office next week, I will be meeting with the contractor on site and we'll be going over those repairs and what needs to be done there. So we expect this all to be finished and complete this fall.
So I hear that, Stephanie. I guess the one thing I would ask is I'm a bit surprised we didn't know the depth of the repairs that were needed and prepared. And I think it's been several months we've been asking about this. So I guess maybe it's just me saying that this needs to, from my perspective, I would like it to be the last time we have to have an update on this. I think that they should have walked it. They should have seen the cracks. They should have seen the necessary repairs. And I think it's been all summer. We've known about them since last year, right? Am I wrong on that timing?
You are not wrong. They've known about it. They were committed to it. They gave us a time frame last year when we discovered a new areas where the coating had cracked. And that last year, he said we'd be there in April. I have been communicating with him since, and we finally just said basically, he kept pushing the date off, and I'm sure it's because he has other jobs that he's doing, but that doesn't mean he should not be doing and taking care of our issue. So we did have to send a letter that got his attention, and he is committed to finishing it up. So yes, after our meeting next week, we should have a final date for the final repairs, and we should be closing that out.
So Appreciate that, Stephanie. I did not know we had to escalate it to that. That's kind of the first time I've heard that there seems to have been this type of what I'll call slightly adversarial posturing, where it was supposed to have been done in April. We've gone this far and we had to send them what seems to be a motivational letter of some sort. So what I'd like to do is just take it offline so as not to jeopardize any types of our conversation and negotiations. But I would like to connect with you and Wayne to understand more the dynamics of this particular situation and what other avenues of resolution might be available to us, up to and including whether or not we have the opportunity to engage somebody else to fix it and to charge that vendor back. So this is just one of those things where I think appropriately so, Al's been highly focused on this. We want to get those monies back into the fund reserve so that we can use it in other places. And we want to make sure that people appreciate that we want to hold them to their commitments. So if the team's okay with that, I'll just follow up with Stephanie and Wayne separately. And then that way, maybe position how we discuss with the vendor going forward to get this resolved and closed out. Perfect. Are we in any way, shape, or form, Stephanie, concerned that we have identified other areas of failure?
We are not concerned with that. There are no other areas of failure. I've been out there and done an inspection myself. Todd Texera has
Okay.
been out there as well.
Cool. Sorry, I misunderstood, I think. All right, appreciate that. Team, any other questions on the pickleball courts? Nada. I used up all the words for our whole team. I captured it all. I love it. All right. Next up, so we are, just as a reminder to our team, we are in the letters of interest phase. So this isn't like we're voting for a project. We have 3 phases. One is a letter of interest. Do we even want to encourage for an application, or do we find too many challenges with it now or too many questions? And or do we send the potential applicant back to do more legwork with better direction from us for a draft application? And even at the second phase, which is the draft application review, that does not mean that we accept it or vote on it or finalize it. We might, but the last phase is the finalization of the application. So appropriately so, we've set ourselves up to have a really good learning process. That's what this letter of interest phase is all about. And we have the ponds preservation up first. Stephanie, Wayne, do you guys want to intro it for us, or?
Jen will be speaking to it.
Sweet. There you go, Jen. Now you're in. I tried to get you in earlier, but
No, that's okay. This is all good. I just want to grab the right file because I have a couple things here.
no worries. Just to fill the void, the project lead contact on this is Denise Higgins. Hi, Denise. Good to see you join us. How are you?
How are you?
Good to see you. The project title is the Easton Pond Rehabilitation. This address is the New Pond, Old Pond, Long Pond, Langwater Pond. Category open space. The estimated total cost of the project is $10,000, and the funds are requested for aquatic ecology and biology consultant fees. The Conservation Commission has also received a $5,000 grant from the Taunton River Stewardship Council of $5,000. So it looks like the amount requested would be $5,000 if I did my math right. And
It's 5,000 for the evaluation of the other 2 ponds plus the treatment for FY25. Or
got it.
FY20,
So
I suppose.
I see the total cost is 10 grand. What's the total CPC ask?
Right now, I only know 5,000.
Gotcha.
I'll give you the full update so you understand what.
Perfect.
Good.
I'll pass the mic. Thanks, Jen.
Okay, yeah. Denise had contacted me about concerns at New Pond Dam for the invasive species that are taking over the entire pond and water quality, and met with them and a number of residents around the pond. Since at that time, Denise had filed the application for the letter of interest. At the last Conservation Commission meeting, Denise had asked if the Conservation Commission would be able to take over that project. And that makes sense because it is conservation property. We're hoping to pair with Joe Pitti as well. But we'll talk about that later. They're not quite ready to get into that So we did receive $5,000 from Taunton River Stewardship Council. Knowing that we were trying to get as much information as possible to you for, the request, we asked Water and Wetlands to just begin the project. We had half the money, so we asked them to take a look at New Pond and Old Pond Dam. They already did the plant evaluation. They've done the water quality testing. They just started evaluating it, and their report and their recommendations for those two ponds will be available. He said he probably needs 2 more weeks and then he'll be all set. So we'll be able to give you a much better idea of the ask, hopefully at your next meeting. I do have, a few maps that they gave us if you want to see something like that. Old Pond Dam is mostly infested with fanwort, and New Pond Dam has fanwort and variable milfoil. Their initial assessment is that they're both a bit beyond manual controls, and it would very likely need some sort of herbicide treatment. But once they finish reviewing the water quality analysis, they'll be able to give us their full recommendations. There'll be a discussion with the Conservation Commission. There's wetland permitting that's involved in that. And then, we'd also hopefully be able to assess the other 2 ponds next year. But we didn't want to waste a whole summer. It was a perfect time. They were available. So we said, yeah, please at least review the first 2 ponds so that we could get you some more information.
Sure. Meredith, you have your hand raised?
Thank you. I apologize. I have heavy allergies, and so my voice is a little bit difficult to hear right now. Jen, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that the Norton Reservoir is at the forefront of this type of care and maintenance with weeds. And again, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you came from Norton. If that assertion is correct, were you part of the care and this type of a program when you were in Norton? And if so, can you tell us what they did there? Thank you.
Yeah, it was 4 ponds as well. Norton Reservoir, if you've ever been by Winnicunnet Pond, you could almost walk across with so many weeds. And all the ponds have responded beautifully. So usually the ponds are so far gone, there's not an option to use a manual treatment, hand
recording in progress,
or anything like that. So an herbicide treatment was needed for, it's been a while. So Chartley Pond, Norton Reservoir, Winnicunnet Pond, and Barrowsville Pond were all ponds that had been treated. They all received their funding from town meeting. Usually in the beginning, the first treatment is the whole pond. But then as it starts to work, the cost decreases, the amount of area decreases, and the usable area for recreation and wildlife and water quality increases over time. It is an ongoing maintenance project. You'll never have a crystal clear swimming pool. There will be monitoring from time to time. But overall, it's it's an important project. If we do nothing, then the ponds all fill in and start to eutrophication, and they won't be ponds anymore. So it was great that residents brought that to our attention, and the Conservation Commission had a discussion about it. They are very interested in pursuing the project, and we're hoping we can partner with recreation and other organizations.
And when you say they won't be ponds anymore, just so I can clarify for all the folks, I'm sure we don't have a huge listener base, but it just helps us all. I guess I have 2 questions. One, when you say they won't be ponds anymore, does that mean that they largely they fill in? They
start to fill in. There's so much aquatic vegetation that as the stream flows through the pond, the plants start to capture all the sediment. And then as the plants start using all of the oxygen, the fish start dying, the plants start dying. It just sort of gets all gunked up in there. And as the plants start to die and accumulate with the sediments as well, plants start growing in them. It goes from, an emergent marsh kind of into a forested area with a stream that would run through it the way it did long before dams were put in place. So.
And Jen, second question, when people hear water and herbicide, that usually causes a response, especially in a very water quality conscious community as Easton.
Yes.
Could you just help us understand why that's a good thing and the herbicides that may or may not be used and how that works and why people should or shouldn't be concerned about that?
Well, I mean, they should be concerned. It's certainly something that needs to be looked into. When we were in Norton, we looked very closely at what they were proposing. We looked at the soil, the safety material sheets to see what the impact would be on the rest of the plants and animals. It's not a decision that's taken lightly, but there's a certain point where you either have to use herbicide or you aren't able to make any effect on the invasive plants.
Okay.
But this would be a recommendation. And then there's a whole permitting phase. There's a whole, public discussion on whether, the herbicide might be the appropriate treatment, but if, people say, no, we don't want herbicide, then that's a different thing. So start with the science, and then start taking a look at what the future impacts would be. A lot of them can be monitored to make sure there's not an issue. But I would really love to hear from our consultant. They're going to provide much more clear information than what I can give you right now, just because I don't even know what they're proposing. There are different types of chemicals that work for different plants, work for different amounts of time. Some have to be, you have to have the water not moving. There's a lot that goes into it. It's not just grab Roundup and dump it in the pond. There's a lot that goes into it.
Right, makes sense. Yeah. Team, any questions, thoughts, concerns that we want to ask Jen or Denise? Hearing none, that's usually an indication that most people would support seeing a draft application, Jen and Denise. So if, unless anybody on the team feels differently, we would welcome you folks submitting a draft application.
Great.
I think to your point, Jen, you've certainly answered my question in terms of understanding the importance of how the residents feel and what the right steps are and how best to support you. In the draft application process, I can tell you that one of the questions the team usually has is, will this result in a follow-on ask? And if so, what might that look like? Again, we know we're not there, but again, if it's spend 50 grand to do a study for a $50 million project, this is not, but it just helps us to know that, because the $50 million project would be very hard for us to support and execute and fund. And we would just want to understand that. I know you wouldn't do that, but that's more for general commentary. So
absolutely. I mean, we can estimate as best we can, but until you know how the pond works after the first treatment, it's a little tough for the consultant to be able to estimate that, but we'll do the best we can.
Sure. Yep, that sounds good. All right, we'll look forward to getting your draft application. Wayne's really good with schedules and dates, which is awesome. And so we'll get you on the schedule for a future meeting. Don't know which one just yet, but we look forward to getting a draft application. If you need anything from us, obviously Wayne and Steph are great resources, and I'm available as well. Any questions or thoughts come up.
Hey, great. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. All right, next up on our agenda for today is the Tufts Farm Restoration Project.
Okay.
So Jen, you're not going anywhere. Welcome back.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, right. So team, just to give a lay of the land of the letter of interest, the total estimated project cost is about $365,000. This is a rough estimate right now. The CPA funds requested currently are $265,000. The other sources of funds would be an insurance settlement in the amount of $100,000, There are interested in getting donations, but that amount is unknown and uncommitted to at this point. And so with that, I would love, Jen, if you could just bring us up to speed about this historic farmhouse and outbuilding preservation project.
Yes.
And I think you said a current tenant was available if you want them.
The tenant is here, but he's driving. So
sounds good. But if you just want that person promoted, feel free to let us know. If you don't, then we don't need to, because you are the applicant requester. So I will hand the mic over to you.
So
I
a
would
bit of
say just in
background, I did enable him to talk, but his phone is muted. So Dan, if you want to unmute your phone at any point, you will be able to talk or answer questions.
Thanks, Wayne. I know he's driving, so maybe we'll unmute him at the end just in case. But so I did receive word that we did receive the check for the $100,000 from the insurance settlement, and that will be deposited in town hall early this week, early the beginning of the week. So that is good. We do have that settlement is done. We do have the funding. The farmhouse, the barn, the workshop, the entire farmstead are incredibly important to our tenant. He made a bid on the property, assuming he would be able to use the house, and then unfortunately had that water damage. So the estimate that you received, it was from the company that had performed the demolition and the removal, and they were able to give us that estimate maybe a year or two ago, or a year ago now. So we definitely need to rehabilitate the farmhouse. That is something that our tenant was intending to use and is hoping to use, as soon as possible whenever we're able to do that. I do have sort of a overall question for you. The last one you asked if there would be follow-ups. The barn and the workshop are also needed for the tenant. And I'm looking for some advice from you guys. Do you want to see the whole farmstead, or keep things in phases and give you information about the farmhouse? How best would we move forward on that? It is the all of town property that does need some rehabilitation. Before the water damage, we were starting to work on the barn and the workshop with roofing and siding and windows, and there's some sill damage near the foundation. But after the water damage in the farmhouse, we had to shift everything toward that project.
I'll take a stab at it, and we're on a live call with committee members, so they have a right to also take a stab at it too.
Yeah, absolutely.
I guess the way I would probably phrase it is just, and I want to learn too, so let me put that out there as well. Maybe supporting an overall comprehensive plan for this property would be something that could be added, understanding if there are emergency items for consideration. I know our committee prioritizes those first. I feel pretty confident about that.
Yeah. Okay.
But the other questions I know that at least I have, and I'm sure others might have, is what would happen if there wasn't a CPC fund? If this was town property, would this be supported by the town capital structure?
It would need to go on the capital budget and
Right.
before town meeting. Yeah.
So I almost feel like, to answer your question, we'd have to probably know almost the entirety of it.
Okay.
Again, if it's a multi-million-dollar project, that's a really big impact to our ability to fund and commit to a number of projects. That doesn't mean it isn't worthy. It doesn't mean it shouldn't be considered. But if this is 265 and another 50 later on, well, then that's different than 265, another 500, another 800, and then another 500. And the next thing you know, 4 years, it's been a $2 million project. So I think I applaud you for asking the question. Is absolutely
I want to give you upfront information as much as I can. It is a wonderful town resource, and we have a fantastic farmer who's been there for about a year now and made so many improvements to the property, and we're really happy to have him there. And we
I don't
want to
mean to
help
be
him
a wise
succeed
guy.
in his business, and we need to put the investment into our own municipal buildings. And so that's just the question, how best do I present that to you, the overall, and then or in phases, or what's best for you all to see. So it sounds like try to get as much information as possible and do the overall plan for you, and then have another discussion on strategy, I guess, is what we're looking at.
I think so. I guess where I'm going with it is if the team agrees with the $265,000 for expense here, and if so, I think the team might be amenable to adding some monies for you to actually do a proper assessment of all of the buildings and to, I don't know if you have the ability to get that done free. If you do, that's great. But sometimes having a comprehensive plan developed by, I don't know who they are, Stephanie, Wayne, help me, but structural engineers, people who are way smarter than me. And then that way it would help us, Jen, to understand that long term. Because then we can work with the town. Again, if it's not the CPC, it would be the town. I think we all value and treasure this historic property. I think we all just try to understand the allocation of scarce resources and who may or may not be able to assist at any given point. If there are grants that are available that we could go get, that Wayne and Steph and all of us could work on. I know we're incredible as a town getting grants already, but you see where I'm going with it, I think.
Oh, yeah. And I've been looking for grants myself.
Right. Team, I hope I didn't overstep in kind of giving some direction to the applicant. Do you folks have any thoughts on that? I'd welcome your opinions. I know how to call on people. I really do.
I think you pretty much nailed it on, I think we need to see the entire picture so that we know what we're getting into down the road, because there are significant expenses that we know are coming too. So we're all for helping. So, if we can, and it's within reason, then we're all for
it. Perfect. And Jen, just one of the other things. So I think we are saying, yes, we'd like to get a draft application on this. I haven't heard anybody say no. I would sense that this one is a little bit more, we're going to have to probably chat a little bit more on this one than the first one, which is completely okay. And we can connect, certainly Stephanie and Wayne are resources in the development of a draft application. And I'm happy to connect as well. To see how we can determine this. And one of the questions I think we'll all have is help us understand how this is a resource for Easton. I'll just use it as an example. I think everybody knows how the militia park fencing and fields are used, but how this property is a benefit to the residents would be something that, aside from its purely historical nature and the fact that it's a historical farm and it's operating, but just how the residents can be engaged and what the value is that it adds. I'd love to see that come out in the draft application discussion.
Sure.
Meredith, I know you have your hand raised.
Thank you. Can we, or is it maybe even for the public, is there an opportunity for us to tour the property? The last time it was toured by our board, I wasn't able to attend, and I'd love to be able to do that so I can get a visual and understand some of the data here.
That sounds like a great idea. I'm sure we can coordinate something with Dan, our tenant, and I'm not sure if he wants to add anything at this point. So
that's a great call, Meredith.
That was a very good question. I'd love to show the property to everyone. Looks like
Dan, you're unmuted now, I think. Welcome. Regrettably, nobody can hear him, right? Regrettably, we can't hear you, Dan.
There he is.
Going in and out.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, Jen, if you don't mind, I'll ask you to just encompass Dan's comments and maybe send them back to Wayne, Stephanie, and I.
Yep.
And team, what I'll do is I'll just send them out via BCC. And then that way we're not deliberating on them, we're just getting information, which is completely okay. And we can share Dan's comments just to add while they prepare for the draft application.
That's good. Like Wayne, I will be away next week, so don't expect them next week, but we'll get them to you as soon as possible.
All good, no worries. Thank you so much for that heads up, though. Okay, so team, is everybody agreed and aligned on asking this applicant to provide a draft app? Perfect. Next up, Chestnut Street Land Conservation.
Okay.
Just going to skip ahead in our deck to that particular letter of interest. I think I have it. Okay, so Jen, again, welcome back, 3 in a row. This request, this is the Easton Mansfield Forest Corridor. This request is for funding to purchase an approximately 18-acre parcel in Easton as part of a joint project with the Mansfield Conservation Commission. A resident has approached both organizations to purchase the land for permanent preservation. While this land is not specifically itemized in the CPC plan, the preservation of this land meets many of the listed CPC goals within the plan. And of course, using my own words now, it's always okay to be opportunistic. Not every plan can be built to have every contingency, but including creating connections with other protected land and other municipalities to create a larger preservation block. We request a placeholder of $650,000, but we anticipate the actual price to be significantly lower. We have commissioned the appraisal, anticipate receiving it in early fall to have a more definitive purchase amount. We also anticipate writing additional grants to further reduce the cost to the town. From matching funds, $2,000 from the Mansfield Conservation Commission of Mansfield, $6,500 from the Easton Conservation Commission for the Easton appraisal, with 3 purchase options. Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Action Grant or similar with a 75% reimbursement rate for Easton land purchase. I believe are you the applicant, Jen, or is the person who approached you the applicant on this?
The Conservation Commission is the applicant.
Got it. And so just in full disclosure, I think it's absolutely appropriate to be transparent and upfront. The person who approached the Conservation Commission is Arlene Keach. That is Meredith's mom. And so for the appropriate reasons, all of them involved, Meredith will most likely have to abstain and or obtain an opinion. And Stephanie, Wayne, I'm looking at you guys, even though I can't see you, Stephanie. But I would ask you both to work with Meredith to advise her on how she can properly engage on this, given her family connection. And I defer to Meredith as well. So I'm not trying to be the expert here. I'm just simply trying to inform all present who the parties are that are involved. And so with that, I'll be quiet. And Jen, I'll let you take it away. And Al, I know you talked about this parcel as well in part. So go for it, Jen.
Great, thank you. Occasionally we have things like that come up with conservation, and so typically the person would recuse themselves from the public hearing and then abstain during the vote if they have some sort of a financial gain out of the project. But this is a very exciting project. It's rare that you get to do a project right on the town boundary and both sides of the property are ready to make some action. So Easton Conservation Commission and Mansfield Conservation Commission are looking to preserve that Keach property. It will be directly abutting several other parcels of protected land. So maybe purchasing 15 to 18 acres will turn into a 100-acre preserved corridor. And that's really important for wildlife. This property is listed as rare species habitat along with many of the other private properties next to it. So it also affords an opportunity to come back at another time with different property owners and see if you can get conservation restrictions and make that a sizable block, a landscape block for important wildlife habitat. It's also extremely important for forestry and climate resilience, storing carbon, protecting habitat and natural resource protection are in your CPC plan. So that's great to see that there. We have provided a revision to the CPC plan where we're looking at the Conservation Commission is looking at all the aspects of a property and sort of ranking it. This would score very highly on our ranking system. I'm not sure if you had a chance to discuss that at all, or if that's something you're interested in adopting, but for the Conservation Commission, it is an important area. I've already started drafting a grant application under the Forest Preserve Program that's due at the end of the month. That's a 50% reimbursement project. We're working with Wildlands Trust and both conservation commissions. Our appraisal, we were hoping it would be ready by this meeting. I heard from our appraiser today. He said he needs another couple of weeks and then he should be finished with the appraisal costs. That'll give us a much better idea of what we're requesting. I'll also need that for the grant application and to the state. And so I'm hoping to have that in the next couple of weeks.
Perfect. Team, questions? Support?
Would anyone like to see a map? Would that be helpful?
I gotcha. I can share that.
Oh, okay. I have a new one that Wildlands Trust created, if that's helpful.
Hopefully you guys can see this one. And
That's a good one. So you can see the pink, that's already protected conservation property in Easton. Green is Mansfield Conservation Commission. The two parcels in the center are what is requested for purchase by the two conservation commissions in different towns. You can see it creates a rather large block, a nice corridor. All of the yellow is endangered species habitat. So these are species that are on the Massachusetts endangered species list, and sort of they're deserving of our protection. They're like our elephants and rhinoceroses. They're not as charismatic as African wildlife, but we do have a stewardship responsibility to make sure they stay around for others to enjoy and to perform their ecological functions.
Al, should we get your thoughts?
Just one. I don't think the yellow doesn't show up, at least in my screen, so I don't have the clearest understanding of the area of the rare habitat. So maybe Jen can help us with that, please.
Sure.
That make it better or make it bigger?
You see, these two parcels are right in the heart of that rare species habitat area. It's all
okay.
All yellow.
Okay, thank you.
I'll even get it. Yeah.
Good question, Al.
That's clear. Thank you.
Sure.
Property is right in the heart of it.
Yeah.
If I could just make a comment, it seems that in the printed version, if you print out what was sent in the binder, the yellow doesn't show up. So maybe we can send out a color version of that so that Al can and everyone else can see that rare species area that Jen was just talking about.
Sure. This was in today's deck, so I know it's not printed, but if you do call it up in a PDF viewer, you can enlarge it and see it. I think you could see it when I enlarged it, right, Al?
Yes.
Perfect.
Okay.
But yeah, Jen, if you have a better map or a newer map, we'll take it.
Yeah, I have a newer map, but it didn't have the rare species habitat on it. So let me work with Wildlands Trust a little bit more and try to get some better, really good mapping for us.
All right. I guess, team, any questions? Give me some flavor of feedback for Jen. Al, where do you stand? I know you're on Concom.
I'm very supportive of this project. I was keeping my mouth shut, but the whole commission is very supportive of this. So while they may not be able to speak tonight in favor of it, I know if they were present, every single member commissioner would support it.
Our chair and our vice chair were planning to be here, and the last minute they both got called away separately at work events, so they were texting me to apologize, but they were planning to be here.
No,
Jennifer, in the last meeting, wouldn't you say that that's a fair representation of their positions?
Yes, yeah, it's pretty unanimous that this would be good landscape conservation project, and
awesome. And I'm just going to ask, and I might have to get forgiveness, but do you prefer Jen or Jennifer?
Oh, it could be either.
Okay, fair.
I start with Jennifer because sometimes when I say Jen, people hear Jan, and then that's all wrong. So I start with Jennifer, and then whatever it is, it is.
Fair. All right, sounds good. So team lead, Jim?
I support it.
Gotcha. So I think that's enough for us, Jen, to actually ask you to come forward with a draft application. I do believe it would be incredibly helpful for us to have more of an understanding of the appraisal.
Yes.
I think we have more asks this year than we do in terms of current year funding. And so if they all did come to fruition, it would become a question as to whether or not we would finance that or dip into our reserves. And I think we had dipped into our reserve recently. So fingers crossed, comes back. The grant process is hugely successful. And we look forward to the draft application that you could submit in helping us understand why this is such a great opportunity for us to take advantage of. I do believe Mansfield already procured the funding for their parcel. Is that?
They did.
Right?
Yes.
So just team, so that you know that's already some good news in terms of removing that doubt or risk about that side of the project. And as always, Jen, greatly appreciate you representing all of these projects and certainly our community so well.
Thank you. That's great. Thank you, everyone. These are all exciting projects, and I'm glad we're moving to the next step. And hopefully, the drafts will be we'll have all the information for you guys. So.
Sounds good. Thank you so much. And again, I'll just Wayne and Steph, if you could reach out to Meredith. I do appreciate Jen's commentary, but I know that we also in the state of Massachusetts have access to ask these questions for free and just to understand what we can or can't do or say. And I absolutely think Meredith should avail herself of anything she wants to. So just please, Steph and Wayne, help her get whatever guidance and thoughts and words and information she needs.
Yeah, I'll connect with Meredith next week when I'm back in the office.
Cool. Awesome. All right. Jen, are you finally done? Are you leaving us after?
Yes. Good night.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thanks, Jen.
Next up is the town pool splash pad plans. So this is when the world famous Joe Pitti will be joining us. Welcome. Good to have you. Good to see you. This particular item, let me just get to this page. There it is. So, look, I know we've all been in the town an incredibly long time. Many of you longer than I have. But where I'm going with this is I think most of us had young kids in our community. And at some point, we're incredibly thankful for the town pool where we could all go and they could have a swim in what I would argue is mostly like sand, but the water being very clean. And far too many ice creams having access to that we could buy them. And that's another way to say that I'm grateful our kids had a place to go to, such as the town pool. So this project, it's great to see it come up. Looking forward to learning more about it. This is for a splash pad site study and construction plan. I think we all know where the address is. Certainly falls under the recreation category for the CPA. Joe Pitti is the lead contact, and I'm assuming the actual applicant as well. The total estimated project cost is currently $125,000. The CPA funds requested are 105,000. So the remainder of the costs would be from departmental or revolving funds. And we always appreciate contributions and partnership from the applicant. I think we like to call it skin in the game. I'm not really sure where that came from historically, but we do appreciate meaningful engagement and support. So, Joe, with that, I know this kind of came in, so to speak, towards the end, but I appreciate the write-up, and I'll just let you take it from here.
Yeah, absolutely. Everybody, it's nice to meet you. My name is Joe Pitti. I'm the Director for Community Engagement and Programming for the Town of Easton. This project is something that it seems like the town and the residents are really interested in. So for those of you that may not have followed our department for the last few years here, we've A, been really busy with programming, but B, in the last few years, we've made a concerted effort to try to maximize the town pool as a recreational facility in town. To that end, last year we rolled out an engagement survey that a few hundred people, I think almost 1,000 people actually responded to, mostly to ascertain, what do you like about the town pool? Why do you go there? What are some things that you might recommend to us? And one thing that was a recurring theme that wasn't even a prompt in that particular survey was that folks were hoping to see a little bit of development there. I think about 10 or 15% of the responses from that particular survey indicated that they would love to see some development. And I think about half of that folks went out of their way, sort of in that last qualitative question that we provided, to say, we would love to see a splash pad on site. If you look at some of our neighboring towns, not that we are trying to say, oh, our neighbors have such and such. This is becoming a more popular amenity in Massachusetts. When you consider why, there's a significant importance when it comes to aquatic facilities for young kids, particularly those that are sort of the pre-swim age, familiarizing them with water, getting them comfortable so that when they do become age appropriate to take swim lessons, there's not as much hesitancy. Additionally, these are really family-friendly types of facilities. Parents, grandparents can escort, chaperone, maybe take a seat in the shade if it's a hot day. It can add to the family-friendly nature of this particular facility. I do have a few sort of design concepts. If you're familiar at all with splash pads, I'm happy to share the images if you'd like, but it would essentially be some ground spouts, maybe some overhead sort of devices, but nothing too overly complicated. It'd be sort of a smaller footprint, if you will. To that end, we've done a little bit of research. I've connected with a few departments around town, as well as talked to some aquatic engineers that have taken on similar projects in the past to get an idea, sort of like initial feasibility, and what costs have looked like in recent years. As obviously, I'm sure you all are plenty aware, as costs have started to rise with a variety of things in our area. Based on these overall footprints, we are looking at sort of a fairly broad range, in my opinion, of anticipated planning costs. Based on as I noted in our letter of interest, given the circumstances of the site, an aquatic engineer said you could expect anywhere, probably north of 100. If you find the right vendor that might be willing to do it, it could come in a little bit lower, which we'd certainly aim to do with any bidding process. Total transparency, this is my first time doing this, but I heard you all earlier. A subsequent request would likely follow. The going rate for these installations, anywhere in the range of about 15 by 20 square feet, would be about $400,000 to $500,000 for installation. The overall cost of it would be dependent on the type of splash pad that we were looking at. There are what's called open and closed systems. Closed systems tend to run a little bit more because there is a chlorination system that goes into it, similar to a swimming pool. My understanding that may be the route that the state of Massachusetts is hoping folks go, and there may be some policy that comes out in the next year that solidifies that a bit more. But these are sort of just contextual things that I was hoping to put on your radar, just so we're all on the same page.
And Joe, I'm sorry, just to clarify,
Sure.
only because I'm not sure if I heard it right. The total cost of the project after the roughly, let's call it 125, you think is around 600?
So the town of Taunton, or city of Taunton, told me that they installed one slightly larger than the estimated footprint that the DPW and I, measured out on an on-site, and theirs came out to be about 420 to 440. I think they had mentioned. The exact number sort of escaped me.
Got it. Thank you so much. I appreciate just that general context, and we won't hold you to perfect numbers, but it helps us get some bookends.
Well, thank you. Tom, if you don't mind, I'd like to share sort of an aerial from Google Maps of the facility, so I might be able to provide a little bit of context of general location. Excellent. Thank you. All right. Can folks see this?
Yes.
Thank you. So I've showed this image to, as well as some photos. Obviously, you have some photos over here. To aquatic engineers, and I walked the site with DPW engineers and Todd Teixeira. There are 4 locations on site that we are led to believe would probably be really good candidates for a footprint or sort of a location for a splash pad. Most coming at what I believe is the southern portion, adjacent to right where my cursor is now. Hopefully, folks can see it, which would be the southern left side of this aerial. Is one location. This would be sort of smallest footprint. It is adjacent to the pool shack where there is no running water, and there is sort of a receptacle bin where the plumbing runs to from the washrooms on site. The second location, if we go across the beach here, is in between these 2 trees, but prior to the emergency gate entrance. It is mostly level. It would require a little bit of effort to move the paved walkway, which is a part of some of our ADA considerations for this particular facility. We would also need to consider some buffer areas for folks that are around it. And then this general area adjacent to the ramp and the DPW woodshed, any of this general area would likely be my preferred location. But in doing so, we would more than likely need to reroute the fencing just to restrict access to the splash pad, so folks aren't using it at night, and we had sort of like control over individuals coming in and out of the facility. To that end, I know I mentioned before, we are looking at something that have sort of spouts, potentially some overhead items over here. The overall footprint isn't tremendously large, so we would likely be limited in terms of how much space we would have to accommodate certain aquatic features, if you will. Additionally, I spoke with the Board of Health. If there was to be, if it was an open system where we weren't required to do chlorination, they feel fairly confident that any sort of leach or septic, whichever type of device on the other end, it would not be an enormous issue. We'd likely need to go to Concom just to verify, given that it abuts conservation land at the northern part of the property. But so far, the initial indications for the work that we've put in is people feel pretty good about it.
Team? Thank you, Joe. First of all, greatly appreciate it. Team, any thoughts or questions?
Could I just ask who maintains it?
It would fall under my responsibility, similar to the pool as an aquatic facility. From a general maintenance standpoint, open systems are much easier. You essentially set the water on a timer. The water is tap water. It flows through and it leaches out. There's no chemical treatment or anything like that. It's mostly just maintaining whatever spouts or aquatic amenities are on the splash pad. If you are working with a closed system, there's a little bit more chemical balances. Todd Teixeira is the town's certified pool operator, our CPO. He would likely do our monthly dosage of chlorine, similar to what he does with the pool. The chlorine shed is right on site, so a lot of that stuff would probably be fairly routine with him. He felt pretty comfortable with regular maintenance for those types of things. Most of it would be mostly emergent with some routine maintenance.
So there wouldn't be like daily maintenance for debris, leaves, branches, acorns, all that type of stuff?
Yeah, so we ideally set it away from trees. It's sort of why the location at the base of the ramp to the pool would be great. There's not very many trees around it. Part of the facility itself, this might be getting a little bit too far down the road on my end, but from an operational overview, I would envision that the facility would primarily be open while my staff is on premise, providing operation support for the pool. They are scheduled a half an hour early before anything opens to do some tidying on the beachfront. That would include maybe squeegeeing any surface for a splash pad.
Thank you.
I have one question, and that's the amount of water that would be used during a season. And how does a DPU sign, or the water department sign off on that incremental use of water?
That would likely be the case. The water department is the one group I haven't had a chance to chase down and have a conversation of what this would look like. To that end, like I mentioned, these are based on timers, or in some cases they can be push button activated, where water only flows if folks are present.
Yeah, I'm more interested in the quantity of water, not the system specifications. Thank you.
Meredith, you may not be able to talk, and that's okay. It's a letter of interest phase, but if you can, I'm just wondering where the Recreation Committee stands on this.
Sure. Yeah, this has been an ask of Recreation. Gosh, we actually had an applicant wanted to do who wanted to do a splash pad many years ago. I don't know if anybody was on the board at that. Well, Jim Lee would have been, but the person didn't even know we had a pool. But the reason why I bring it up, and so when at the meeting we said, you do realize we have a pool, but the reason I bring it up is because she also wanted a splash pad. It's as a emerging parent, brand new parent, splash pads are hugely helpful when you have kids. I would say probably stop using them when the kids are around 4, maybe even 5, depending on the size of the facility. But it's a safety issue. When you have toddlers and babies, you want to bring them to a water place. You always start out at a splash pad. And, we have the zero entry pool, which is magnificent. But it just adds another, just a nice safety feature. And parents are always asking us for a splash pad. So the board is certainly behind something like this. But I think the questions are all valid. Water usage is obviously a big issue when we're in, constant water bans. Are you going to be able to park down there? You have Picker Pond. Would it be safe for Picker Pond? Is the access to it? These were all questions that the board had. But I think that location, expanding on it, our pool is, it's a beautiful resource. People love it. We have increases in membership every year, and I think that would just add to it, especially with the recent renovations that we've had at the pool. So yeah, the board is on board.
Appreciate that, Meredith. Team, just general consensus. Do we feel aligned that the applicant should submit a draft application and at least take it to the next level phase?
Yes, I think.
Yes.
Yes.
All right, I know Meredith said yes, and I'll say the same, Joe. So we would entertain a draft application. I think the price tag, the future price tag of the actual installation, certainly is, it's up there. So helping us in your draft application, just giving you some initial feedback, understand the impact and the benefit to the residents of the community, just like Meredith stated, would be super helpful. I know I'm just looking at your letter of interest. How many people, the growth that we talked about, I guess I would say, in terms of how many people are using the pool itself and how this might be helpful. I think that would be excellent as well. I know you get roughly about 5,000 visitors between the months of July and August over the last couple of years. So, I think if you can demonstrate that to the residents, it will help us when we stand before them at town meeting someday, if we do get that far. Just explain to them the value equation and the value proposition. Easton's incredibly special, and the town pool plays a role in that. And if it's the right thing to be able to invest in and enhance, then we have an opportunity to help people understand that.
Excellent. Thank you all. I appreciate it.
Yeah,
One thing,
thank you. Did we lose Jim Lee?
one other thing that I'd be interested in finding out about is is there an option to use the pond water, the pool water, and put that back in after it's sprayed, rather than drawing down Easton water supply?
That's a great point, Al. I think, Joe, the takeaway is, where we do believe passionately about Concom, and so your efforts in conjunction and working through with them to make this the best environmental impact while considering all the other factors you have to kind of juggle would certainly be helpful. And Al's got some great questions.
Absolutely.
Anything else for Joe?
Yeah, Tom, could I just ask, I did hear that maybe the state is leaning toward the closed system with the chlorine. If that does happen, that's obviously the way we would want to go. It would be required, I guess. And I think you said maybe a year down the road you might hear that. Is there a way to find out more about that, so that, or if we go with the flowing water, can that be converted should the time come that we're required to do that?
Yeah, so to speak to that a little bit, I had a conversation with Kristen Kennedy, the Director of Public Health for Easton. Her impression is that the state in the next year will likely transition to that and add it to the code, just so that there is some sort of regulation. Because right now, it's my understanding, and granted, I'm not a public health official, there's not a whole lot of regulation on spray decks, splash pads in Massachusetts. To some end, there's going to be regulation. Her insight is that it likely will involve some form of chlorination. I think it would be wise of my office, as well as the CPC, to say we should probably hang tight and see what that comes out to be, so we're not necessarily putting a project together and saying we need to, make significant site changes. I think that's absolutely reasonable and probably the wisest thing for taxpayer money.
Great call. Thank you, Dennis. That's a good point. All right. Unless there's other comments, Joe, I think we're good to go. We'll look forward to the draft application. I think Dennis's point should be taken certainly in that context of, I think the study can go forward, unless you think that the study would encompass materially having to go one way or another. If we had to pick on the front end that it has to be a closed or an open and we don't have that info, that gets a little tricky for us. So help us understand that.
We'll do.
Dennis, is that a good way to reflect what you're kind of saying?
It does.
Yeah.
That's more succinctly than I did.
No, I just want to be sure. You said it perfectly well. I just want to be sure I was replaying it back the right way too. All right, Joe, thank you so much as always. Appreciate all that you do for us, and there's certainly a good vibrancy in our community in terms of engagement programming. So keep up the great work for us.
I appreciate that. Thank you all.
Yeah, cheers.
Take care.
Did Jim Lee, did we lose him?
Yes, he dropped off and I don't see him.
All right, just keep an eye out for him, please. Just want to make sure we get him back as soon as we can. That would be most appreciated. Next up on our agenda today, we have the Militia Park fencing proposal. I believe I saw Nate Crossman in the attendee list. He is the applicant, so if we could promote him, I'll do a little bit of preamble. The letter of interest is for fencing replacement at Militia Park. The obviously would be a recreation category. Nate Crossman is the commissioner of the league. The amount of the project is estimated to be $599,585. For the rest of this conversation, I will say the word 600,000, and you will know I am off by $415. and the CPA funds requested the full balance of $600,000. If required, the league could utilize some of its funds towards this project. They are projecting a contribution of $20,000 towards the project, which would lower it to $579,585. And so, Nate, I'll let you walk us through just, I guess, the project, the fencing, help us understand some detailed questions. I'm sure the team will be asking you many. And thank you so much for submitting a letter of interest.
Thank you, Commission. It's nice to be on this end of the Commission role. So Militia Park, as you know, off of Lincoln Street, houses the local Easton Youth Baseball League. Approximately 420 to 450 players between the ages of 7 and 15 participate in Easton Youth Baseball. We have at our main facility, which is Militia Park, we have 6 baseball fields, and obviously a baseball complex has a lot of fencing. So, we're an all volunteer nonprofit organization. Part of our park is on town land, but everything we do is essentially funded by the league. We maintain our own fields, we raise our own funds, things like that. But it's become a bit of a safety concern, the fencing. We have fencing that is, at least 15 to 20 years old. It is coming, gates are coming down. We have 2-tiered fencing on some of the fields that is becoming detached. So we need new fencing. And like I said, we are very self-sufficient. I would humbly say we're one of the best youth sports leagues in town, one of the best youth baseball leagues in the region. We are a regional tourist destination. I mean, we hosted a state tournament this past year. We had teams from all of Eastern Mass come into town for 5 to 7 days and partake in everything that Easton had to offer. We'll be hosting another state tournament next year, perhaps a New England tournament. So we, I think we do a great job with what we have, with the hand we've been dealt. But this is a project that is necessary due to safety concerns, and one that we were seeking some assistance with because, there is a lot of fencing, right? We have outfield fencing, dugout fencing, backstop fencing. As you would imagine, a baseball field is just surrounded with fencing, and we have 6 of them. So, it's quite a bit of money, and it's a big project, but, something that we think is necessary for the vitality of the park.
Sure. Appreciate that. Folks, please dive in. I'd love to get your feedback and your thoughts. Meredith, certainly this is a pretty big recreation component to our community in town. I would welcome your thoughts from the Rec Commission. But I would ask everybody to engage on this one. If I could get your feedback, it would be incredibly helpful. And thoughts to the applicant in terms of if we do let them recommend they go forward with a draft application, what are the things you're looking for? I would imagine this is, the size of this means we'd want to make sure we were very articulate to the residents of our community what the benefit is. So this is a great time to start asking those questions. Meredith, go for it. Great job using the raise the hand feature, by the way, Meredith.
Address the obvious, and that is what Nate brought up with the park being on multiple pieces of property. And I just want to remind our board that we have voted for improvements on property that isn't necessarily owned by the town. The first is Smith Farm, which we did 2 rounds, if I remember correctly. That's on state land, which is at Borderland State Park. And we, as a board, had lively discussions about that. And ultimately, we decided that the Smith Farm project was a benefit for the greater good for for obviously first and foremost for our residents and the community at large of veterans and those that utilize the Smith Farm. It's a beautiful project. And then more recently, we funded a historical project to preserve the fence at 555 Foundry Street on the corner of Pequannock and Foundry. And thankfully we did that. It was a large ask. And at first I was aghast when I heard the cost. But when you take a look at what we preserved there, it was something that would have gone in a dumpster. And that fence was built at the Revolutionary War. And that corridor is having a complete and magnificent revival, and having that historical piece was a major component in my opinion. And so we have done this type of project before. Melissa Park is used. I am there regularly. The state tournament that Nate referenced is a win for the community at large and the small business owners because people do frequent those businesses. It was a week-long tournament, and it was a great success in my opinion. And we want to be able to host a tournament like that for the town because it's a beautiful facility and we want our small businesses to be patronized, and safety is first and foremost. And as we all know, a ballpark has to have fencing. Fencing itself is ghastly expensive. I know that on a personal level because I had an estimate done for my own yard. And it is what it is. And it has to be replaced over time. You can only repair it so many times. And then once you start to have the gates go into disrepair, it becomes a real safety issue. So I'm in support of it. I'm also in support of a partnership between public and private. And if there can be private funds raised for something to coordinate with CPA funding, I'm also an advocate of that. And I know that EYBL has said that they can raise a certain amount. You know, sometimes if the board can't allocate because of what Chairman Broussard said, you know, sometimes maybe you do a little more fundraising if this is something that the whole ask can't be done. But I'm an advocate certainly of new fencing at Militia Park.
Appreciate that, Meredith.
Yeah, and I would just add, you know, we are, you know, obviously, you know, like Meredith said, it is, you know, it's a lot of, you know, fences are expensive, you know, but I think in the past we've been willing to, you know, put our vast fundraising resources to bear on projects. And, you know, we certainly could, you know, as Meredith said, you know, explore other avenues too. And I would just add as a way to frame this project, you know, on various committees and things that I serve on, we sometimes talk about like, what is the net, you know, what's the net benefit to the town, right? I mean, what is the town of Easton getting out of this? And, you know, we are a net benefit, right? I mean, we serve not only the players and adults who participate in our league, but we maintain a huge swath of land. We maintain it, right? And it's not private. Anyone can use those fields, and they're used, you know, all the time. They're used as, you know, they're, you know, used for pickup games, and, you know, people come down to hang out. And, you know, I've seen flag football practices happening, and people use the batting cages. So, you know, we do give back a lot to the town. You know, so that's just something to consider. Thank you.
Appreciate that. Al, any comments?
No, I think it sounds like a good project, and personally I would support it.
Okay. Dennis?
My only concern, these tournaments and stuff, it's all volunteers that are doing all the work. And I know these tournaments bring in a lot of money. And I wonder, where does that all go if 20,000 is the most that Easton Youth Baseball could afford to put toward this project?
You know, we'd be happy to, you know, have our treasurer share our balance sheet. But, you know, we're, like I said, we're 100% volunteer, 100% nonprofit. So, you know, all of our funds go into, you know, for example, I mean, you wouldn't think it, but, you know, having umpires for a fall, summer, and spring season costs, you know, anywhere between $20,000 to $35,000 a year. we always have capital improvements on fields that can run between, $20,000 and $30,000, right? We're running our own snack stand now. We're transparent, right? We have board meetings every month where we share, we share what goes in and what comes out, and we're more than happy to share that with you. But we do make, we do make money on these tournaments, but they go directly back into programming.
Amanda, you don't have to talk, but just want to ask you as well. I asked everybody else. No worries. Oh, people are bouncing around. Jim, welcome back. Good to have you.
Thanks. I lost the internet.
So we were just reviewing the Militia Park fence letter of interest. Nate did a great job of walking us through the need, the benefits to the community, and everybody has asked questions. I was just asking if you, honestly, that you've joined, if you have any questions that you might have had from reading it. I know you don't have the benefit of hearing everything, but did you have any thoughts or questions on this particular letter of interest?
I don't. Thank you.
All right. Nate, so I'm with the team. I think there's just a tremendous value that you have here, but I think I have just a couple of, I guess, thoughts that I would really need to see answered in a draft application. First, I think like Tufts Farm, I personally would love to walk this property. So what I'll do is I'll just ask Stephanie and Wayne to just coordinate with you as well. And whoever from the CPC would like to go for a walk, we can check it out. It's been a while since I've been there, candidly. So, and the last time I was there, I wasn't looking for a fence, or at a fence. So I'd love the opportunity to see it just because of the size of this ask. So that's one. Two, I think Dennis hit on something that is particularly sensitive to me as well, which is, and we said it earlier, I think the skin in the game aspect. We would love for you folks to go back and sharpen your pencils and think how much you could fire up your base. I know that they are rabid. I have neighbors with kids that have gone through it, so I see the benefit of them and the fun they have. But I'm hopeful you could motivate them to hopefully contribute to this project.
Yep.
I would ask you to coordinate with Stephanie and Wayne the answer to this next question, unless you already have it. Actually, let me phrase it a different way. Do you have a defined long-term lease with the owner of the land that has, I believe it's 4 of our fields on it?
No, we are continuing to effort. As you would imagine, this league has been around since the 1950s. I've only been involved since 2014. So a lot of institutional knowledge is sort of passed on. We do not have any, we currently do not have any documentation on hand that would suffice, for what you're talking about. But we are continuing to try to get that.
So what I'd love to do, if the team is okay with this, I'd love to just take that particular subject in terms of the long-term lease and the implications of having a public-private partnership. So remember, this is public land, so we have to be very thoughtful that some of this is on the Town of Easton land and some is not. But I'd love to be able to connect with Stephanie and Wayne and Nate offline to have a discussion just about what that relationship looks like. Does it cause any concern or muddying? Do we technically have to have 2 letters of interest in order to do it the right way? Anything like that. I'm probably making up, but I would just ask the team's latitude to let me take that offline with Nate, Stephanie, and Wayne. And that way we can have the applicant prepared to answer that question in the draft application, if that makes sense.
Right.
I think, Nate, from our side, just speaking plainly, we would be I believe it's 4 fields that are on their land.
Yep.
And so we'd be reticent to invest 4, 6, 2/3. I can do the math. And I was at the Easton Middle School introduction last night, so I did meet Miss Blaine. She would tell her I did not just do 4, 6 goes to 2/3. Otherwise, I'll be in trouble.
I won't
But you see the point, right? 2/3 of this goes to
absolutely. Yep, I understand.
Next year, they're like, "Hey, we can't wait to put in 15 houses."
I get it.
But let us take that offline. I think we can find a way to resolve that and come to a way that will support. The other thing is just, it's a good size quote. I think getting a couple more quotes would be awesome. And there is, just to Meredith's point, so we fencing is not abnormal to us. We just did some fencing, approved fencing over at the Keach Fields, a much smaller project, about 20 grand in total. But if you'd like, I could put you in touch with that applicant and the person they found.
That'd be great.
And that way you could at least get maybe one more person who's already done some field fencing in the town or is going to.
Fabulous.
But team, are you okay with 3 quotes to just help us understand if we're in the ballpark? Those are the big things, just the money in, can we get some fundraising, ownership of the land, and we can take that off the lease component. And I think the walkthrough will help me understand how critical this is. And the fence, and that's super helpful too. That's good. The only other thing, and maybe the walkthrough would be an easier way to talk this through, but if there were phases, and we're not a big fan of phases at all, but if 3 of the fields are in deplorable condition, high risk, concerning, the other 3 have another 5 years on them, maybe it helps us just manage our resources and plan out longer term. But maybe the walkthrough will help us get a better understanding. And team, if you can't make it, don't feel bad. I'm happy to take copious amounts of pictures and work with Nate to make sure you all get that kind of real world experience too.
Yeah, I have one question of Nate, and that is if would it be possible to get some financial support from some of the merchants that specifically benefit from the continued playing of tournaments in Easton? I think there's a kind of a broad range of those are possible, restaurants, gas stations, etc. If they'd be willing to support your effort on this in this regard.
Yeah, absolutely. We have a pretty robust fundraising, apparatus where we're already, tapping into a lot of those resources. But, what we found too is that when we can link fundraising to a specific project, that it goes better. So yeah, we'll absolutely, I mean, I hear your point loud and clear, right? We're going to, like I said, sharpen the pencils and, figure out what we can contribute.
But also having a number of businesses support the effort.
Oh yeah, it would come from them. Yeah,
the effort in town meeting.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think.
All right. So I guess what we're hearing is yes, we'd be interested in having you pursue and present a draft application, Nate. The next step after that is it doesn't mean that's when we vote or approve it. We then go to a final application. So we have a 3-step process. But at least you're through the first hoop, which is good and exciting, and appreciate the dialogue and helping us just understand the project more. And team, I appreciate you both for your enthusiasm and for your good questions, just trying to understand how to fit this project in as well. As I mentioned, I think all of the projects we have put us over our revenue budget for this year. So that'll be a consideration. I just ask all of you to keep in mind. I think we have essentially put all of the letters of interest through, with the exception of the Oaks Ames Memorial Hall at this particular point. I think we gave some very pointed feedback to that applicant. I have not heard back on that. Obviously, that one would put us well over our budget at a $10 to $15 million ask. So I'm excluding that when I give you those numbers. In case you all were wondering why I said I was at the Easton Middle School, welcome back to school. That is because my daughter's in 7th grade. Mr. Crossman happens to be a new vice principal over at the Easton Middle School. So Nate, thank you so much for what you do at the school. And certainly thank you so much for your advocacy for the Easton Youth Baseball. Appreciate all you do for our residents and our community.
You're welcome, and I appreciate your consideration. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. So I think that concludes the letters of interest phase. Let me go back to page 1. Next up, so just a note, so I see it while I'm here, but the Historic Preservation CPA priorities was scheduled for discussion tonight. I noticed that we don't have Ed or John Ventresco, who are both on the Historic Commission. I would ask if you folks would be amenable to pushing that to our next meeting so that we can get the benefit of those 2 committee members on the Historic Commission. Is that okay with you folks? Little housekeeping. Perfect. I think we have a update for Meredith. Raised hand. Doing awesome with this thing.
Thank you. Well, just before we conclude, I just want to make sure we give a shout out to Wayne and Stephanie for their preparation for these last two meetings and the extensive work that they've done. And I had asked for some additional materials, and Wayne was quick to get it. And I just want to say thank you for all the work that you both do, because it's really extraordinary.
Here, here.
Yeah, well said.
Really appreciate that.
Seconded, thirded, fourth, and fifth, and all the above. Yeah, Wayne and Stephanie, you guys are priceless, honestly.
Thank you.
Meredith, not to disappoint you that you think the fun is over, but we still do have a couple items on our agenda tonight. Understand if you're not feeling well, but I think 1, 2, 3, 4. You could drop, but we need to make sure we could hit Amanda to keep our quorum. But I don't think the last two will be super long. First, Wayne, you included the Affordable Housing Trust annual report form. Did you want to give us, I know that we asked for it informationally, but did you want to give us a very brief summary of it? Or is there a detail that you need to, does this need to be gone through in detail?
The form itself, I think, is self-explanatory. The context for it is several years ago, the state passed a law or requirement that municipal affordable housing trusts provide an annual report on their fiscal year expenses to the Community Preservation Committee. And historically, we have always done that with, Wendy Nightingale's presentation of the financial statements, and with the Affordable Housing Trust Chair's presentation and discussion of projects completed in the past year. However, the Community Preservation Coalition, working with MHP, has this recommended template and format for officially monumenting that you have done the required annual report and provided the information that the Department of Revenue wants to see. And so it made sense as a best practice to just use that template, fill it out, present it to the CPC at a fall meeting. And then the utility on our side is this information also feeds into the required CP3 report of monies expended and also monies allocated for the past fiscal year that we have to submit by September 15 in order to qualify for our state match. So folks, longer term members may remember there's always this time of year, these emails that pop up. You submitted your CP3 report, and so that's what that is, and this helps feed into that.
Awesome.
So that's why this is here.
Cool.
There's no board action required.
Thank you so much for the information and for getting us to be on the up and up, as always. Lastly, we do have an update on the Concom, open space kind of focus and planning and priorities. So just by way of introduction to it, there is pages 39 through 42 of this preparation deck that 39 and 40, I believe. Yes, 39 and 40, 41 and 42 of the historic. That talks about the CPC open space. Jen mentioned it earlier about what I think is great is the numbering or ranking system. So let me give you the attributes that could create points, so to speak, because I think it's brilliant the way they've kind of tried to score opportunities. One is, does it protect an aquifer? 2 is, does it protect headwater streams and wetlands, floodplain, vernal pools, isolated wetland, and stream corridors to 200 feet? Does it provide access for boating, canoeing, fishing, or access to a major water body or river? Does it provide carbon sequestration through soil or forestry, or provides opportunity for wetland migration with changing weather patterns, or providing flood storage? Does it protect state-listed rare species or natural heritage and endangered species? So each one of these would be a point or priority vegetation types. The properties abutting other permanently protected or town-owned land, provides a large conservation block greater than 20 acres, can be combined with abutting protected land or on its own, provides linkages, so much like we talked about on the earlier opportunity for the Mansfield Easton parcels, provides linkages for wildlife or for people like terrestrial trails and water trails. Number 9 is it contains historical, cultural, or archaeological significance. Number 10, the land is listed specifically within the current open space and recreation plan. And number 11, the land is actively used for agricultural purposes or contains designated prime, significant, or locally important farmland soils. And so property can be evaluated and receive a point for each of those criteria listed above. If the property meets a minimum of 3 of the criteria, it will be ranked as a consideration. If the property meets a minimum of 5 of the criteria, it will be ranked as a priority. And finally, if the property meets greater than 5 of the 11 criteria, it will be ranked in the highest priority. And the ranking is a tool, which I think is a great way to say it. It's a tool. It's not, sounds like it's not a defined in granite, but a tool for determining desirability for protection. And it could contain other attributes that could still warrant protection due to threat, urgency, or opportunity. The ranking system is used to provide I think it says qualitative, Al, but I think you might mean quantitative value to the property for open space purposes and to avoid any appearance of a conflict of interest. So I think
that would be appropriate. Yes.
Yeah. So I would just recommend Wayne, Steph, Al, whoever the right person is, to get back to the Concom. But I think they're trying to use this ranking as a quantitative tool value. It's a method for looking objectively at the benefits of adding a parcel of land to Easton's open space inventory. And there's great examples that they gave, which is awesome. And then there are a combination of preservation model methods that can lead to a viable project, whether it's a fee simple purchase, assistance with the purchase with another conservation organization, matching funds with federal, state, and local grants, purchase of conservation restriction, historic preservation restriction, or agricultural preservation restriction. So I thought it was really great to see this added, this kind of quantitative approach. And I think it certainly speaks and pays homage to the qualitative importance of some parcels here in Easton that may become before us. But Al, I know I read pretty much verbatim, but you might want to add a little context coming from Concom, or let me know.
I think,
job.
Yeah, I think from our purposes, we'll use that system within the Concom to evaluate projects that come before us. So those that are low priority, you'll never see. They'll never get out of the commission. So it acts as a screening tool. It helps us measure the attributes of each specific option that comes before us in this regard. So, and I think it's a useful tool, and which the commission would share with the preservation committee. But at least it'll show what we think of the property under consideration.
Awesome. Team, any thoughts or questions? No. I guess just say thank you, Al. We appreciate you folks doing the hard work to develop this scale and help us understand how you folks are approaching this. And it just helps feed into us expectations about priority parcels, so on and so forth. So again, thank you for keeping it current and helping us as CPC stay informed. All right, no business that was unreasonably or reasonably anticipated or unanticipated by the chair. Our next meeting is Thursday, October 10th, 2024, same bat channel, same bat time, 7 p.m. At some point, people aren't going to understand when I say that. That'll make me feel even more older than I feel. But unless anybody else has any other feedback or information, I just want to say thank you to Meredith and Amanda for joining. I know it hasn't been the easiest for you guys to participate, but welcome your attendance. And as always, thank you to the rest of the team. I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Sheedy and Lee, and around the horn, Al Benson.
Aye.
Dennis Sheedy.
Aye.
Jim Lee.
Aye.
Meredith Keach.
Aye.
Amanda Varela. And Tom Broussard is an aye. So that's 5 of us. That's enough. Makes it work. And I hope everybody has a great month, and we'll talk to you in October.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Be well.